What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast, Week 13 Recap Edition. I'll tell you what, the NFL is nothing if not entertaining. We have so many huge storylines to track as we are now about a week into December football, 4 weeks left in the season, crazy stuff happening all over the week. And I could not imagine a better co-host than my buddy EJ Snyder to sit here with me and have some drinks and talk through it all. EJ, how you doing and what are you drinking?
I'm fine. I am just hanging on for the ride like most NFL fans at this point. Things are starting to get a little bit disparate. Some teams are out of it. People are talking about draft position. Some teams are on the edge of it, might squeak into the playoffs. Some teams are trying to finish strong. And other fans are just trying to win their fantasy tournaments. So everybody's got a little bit of a different lens this time of year. It hasn't sort of narrowed down to the playoff roster yet, but hanging on. It was a very full week, full slate of games. Kind of forget what that's like when we're having bye weeks, and then I have to sit down and watch all the games. And I was like, whoa, there's a lot of football here. But push through it. Got a great show for everybody. I am drinking for my beer. I brought on a Northwest staple, Alaskan Amber. Very easy drinking, malty, sort of red beer with a lot of flavor in it. I like it. It's something I drink fairly often. And for my shot, I went straight to my People's Water. Just good old Jameson in a glass with ice. We have got a worthy bootleg shot of the week winner from last week, and we will get to that and celebrate him with a little bit of Irish. What do you have?
So for my shot, I got Pendleton Midnight just because I wanted something that would go down easy. I didn't want to wreck myself too bad on a Thursday night or Wednesday night, whatever day it is. Clearly,
what day is it?
Yeah, well, it's December. You know, everything just kind of bleeds together.
Blur's Day. It's Blur's Day.
It's Blur's Day. So I got Pendleton Midnight for my shot, and then for my sipper tonight, I got a little bit of Four Roses Small Batch. I don't think I've had that on the podcast yet. It's actually a blend of 4 different bourbons, 4 different offerings from Four Roses. Kind of a medium age. It's like age 6 to 7 years. A lot of bourbons off the shelf. You'll see like 3 or 4 years, and the higher quality stuff usually get like a 10-year age statement. I think Eagle Rare is 10. It might be 12. But I tend to like pretty much anything 6 or above. So this is kind of the minimum for me in terms of age for a bourbon, because I really like to get a little bit of the woodiness in there and the barrel spice. But small batch from Four Roses is just phenomenal stuff, especially at the price point. It's like $35 a bottle, which is not bad. So that's what I got going with me tonight. Why don't we start things off tonight by getting into the point after, where we talk about something that we did not get to last episode. We're not talking about a game specifically here, but I do feel like at the time they had won 3 games in a row. Now they've won 4 games in a row. And I feel like at some point we got to acknowledge that Dave Gettleman's built himself a nice little roster there up in New York.
Yeah, I am glad that I have a couple of things to drink, because I'm going to have to wash down a little crow. Folks that follow me either on Twitter or this podcast know that I give Dave Gettleman his fair share of crap. I disagree with many of his decisions, and you can argue that, but we both thought he had a pretty good draft this year. We thought that the draft really came to him, played to his strengths, and he didn't veer. He took what it offered, and that is playing out here at the end of the season. This is an exciting young team that's coming together, and they are improving. That is my favorite thing about the Giants right now, is whether or not they're winning games, they are playing better now, both individually and as a team, than they did at the beginning of the year. The young O-line with Thomas and Lemieux, Jabril Peppers is playing much better, I think, than he has almost ever in his career. He's becoming a force. Wayne Gallman's had to step in Saquon Barkley's absence, and he's played very, very well. The staff understands how to use him. Evan Engram really was in sort of no man's land at the beginning of the season. We've seen him come on strongly over the last 3 weeks. And Leonard Williams, a guy that we sort of wrote off for dead or as a not great addition to the Giants roster, a bit of a boondoggle for what Gettleman paid for him. And then he re-upped him. And we just thought that was a silly move. Well, it's paying off. Leonard Williams has bought into Joe Judge's system and is playing extremely well, has a bunch of pressures, more sacks than he's had in years. And overall, as a team on both sides of the ball, Giants are playing better football. And that's what you want to see from a sort of young, developing roster. It makes the Giants a really good spot to be and also sets the level so that they can go get some talent they want to sort of put the cherry on top. They're not building a foundation. They've already done that. And that's impressive. So Gettleman deserves his props. As much crap as I give him, got to give him props when things work out. And things are definitely working out in New York right now.
And I also want to say credit to Joe Judge for being willing to act quickly and making changes on his staff where necessary. They fired offensive line coach Mark Colombo a couple weeks back. There was reports of like a fight or something like that. I don't really know if that's true. Like the report was refuted, and I don't really want to get into what's true and what's not true. All we know is that Mark Colombo got fired. But we've seen a remarkable improvement with Andrew Thomas throughout the season that has spiked significantly even more since Colombo was fired. And he's starting to look like his old self that he was back at Georgia. He started out in the first month and a half of the season giving up about 6 pressures a game, which was the worst rate for any tackle in the league. And then up through the first 10 games, he got it down to about 4.5 pressures a game, which was improvement. But since Colombo was fired, so they've played 2 games since then against Cincinnati and Seattle. Seattle's actually got one of the better pass rushes in the league at this point. They've led in terms of total number of sacks over the last month across the entire league. In the last 2 games since Colombo was fired, Andrew Thomas has not given up a single pressure. So clearly something has helped him. Perhaps having a different voice in that offensive line room, or Joe Judge reportedly was stepping in and teaching him some different stuff. So I think that his willingness to, again, make quick changes on his staff to improve what was being taught to his players should be commended. And so far it looks to have worked. Again, this team's on a 4-game winning streak. They've got some young talent. I still have questions about quarterback, with or without Daniel Jones. I have questions with quarterback for them. But there's some young talent to be excited about here. I really like what their coaching staff is doing. And I don't know if they're like a legitimate threat in the NFC, but I do think at this point they're probably the favorite to win the division, and that should be celebrated.
Yeah, they remind me a little bit of the Dolphins at the end of last year. Right? A team that started off last year, sort of everybody was talking about the tank. They had a new staff. They had a new GM. They were sort of offloading talent, got rid of Minka. Then at the end of the year, started to put together some good games, play some good football, win some games, and really set themselves up to become the team we're seeing this year, which is a highly competitive squad. I feel like the Giants are following a little bit of that pathway, that template, and could be that team next year. Again, depending on how the next draft goes, depending on how the next free agency cycle goes. They've got stability, presumably at GM and coach, which is the all-important handshake in the NFL. And if they add, quarterback talent, now they may be sold on Daniel Jones. Neither of us are, but they've got good offensive pieces surrounding them. They've got, Slayton and Engram and Saquon coming back, hopefully healthy. And even if he doesn't, Wayne Gallman can keep the seat warm very well. The young offensive line, they drafted 3 pieces last year. All of them seem to be contributing fairly decently. The defense is getting big contributions from role players. James Bradbury has been an A+ free agency ad. Like, this is a team that if it adds a few pieces, a few more impact pieces, maybe a little bit more pass rush, this is a team that can make some noise. And the NFC East, not typically strong. Washington football team, another team that's sort of getting its legs under it, could be sort of adding some spice to that division. But the Giants are in it, and another good offseason could really propel them into being a competitive football team on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where they go. And at this point, I would imagine that Gettleman's job is safe now with this kind of last little month they've had. I think Joe Judge has done a good job, and I'm willing to give this another year to see where it goes. They got to hit on quarterback. They have to hit on quarterback. But if they do hit on quarterback, I like where this is going.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads us into the bootleg shot of the week winner from last week. We had a bunch of great nominees, but I got to shine for this one. I don't know why. Jalen Johnson, rookie Bears corner out of Utah, physical guy, leveling Alan Lazard on the crosser, is the winner from last week. He absolutely put on a clinic to the point where the announcer, who was Tony Dungy for that game, was saying, "This is how you do it. Get the head down, make sure you don't hit the opposing player's head, hit him in the midsection, square up, deliver the blow." It was a beautiful shot. I'm sure Lazard doesn't think so, but perfect in terms of technique. I'm going to take a little Jameson's, celebrate.
Cheers. Oh, that goes down so good.
Yeah, nice chilled JMO, man. That's still, I don't know. The Irish do a few things right, and that's one of them. So,
yeah, the Canadians aren't doing bad with penalty.
Oh,
either.
penalty midnight's great. It's funny because midnight's kind of the upgunned version of the premium version, if you will, of regular Pendleton, and I like regular Pendleton. I actually debated on having some of that. I've got a bottle of that upstairs, but midnight's one of those rare variants where I like midnight and I like Pendleton. I like them both about the same. They're different, but they're both really enjoyable, and I don't prefer one or the other. They're usually it's kind of like, the premium stuff's really good there. The base stuff's a little bit better, and they try to do too much with the premium stuff. But no, Pendleton and Pendleton Midnight, different, but both good.
Yeah.
So we've got games.
Yeah. Why don't we get into Eagles-Packers here? Because there's a lot to unpack. No pun intended. Why don't we start with kind of the elephant in the room here? Carson Wentz has been benched. Jalen Hurts is now the starter going forward. Did you like what you saw from Hurts in the limited action in this game? And do you think that he has a shot against this Saints defense?
Oh, against the Saints defense is going to be fun moving into next week because the Saints defense is nasty. And they don't give up a lot of yards through the air, and they definitely don't give up a lot of yards to running quarterbacks. I saw a stat today about the total number of yards that they've given up to quarterback scrambles, and it's extremely low. And we all know as a developing starter in the NFL with mobility, you're going to use that as your out, and Hurts could have a tough sled trying to use that this week against a very good Saints defense. I did like what I saw in limited action. The bar's pretty low there. Carson has regressed to a point where he's clearly not comfortable. His clock seems to be gone. He's panicking almost just post-snap. There's very little processing going on. His eyes are looking to the rush really, really quickly, and he's ducking his head. It's just not good with Carson right now, and Hurts didn't display any of that, had a couple of nice completions, a little bit of improvisation, which is not surprising to any of us who've watched him at any of his stops or through the draft process. So I think there's hope for Eagles fans. I think they're going to be excited to be able to watch that for the end of the season. It remains to be seen what happens with Carson in the offseason, the coaching staff. There's a lot of questions around the Eagles, but the last 3 or 4 games, I think Eagles fans are going to have a lot more fun and probably success overall watching Jalen Hurts than they would Carson Wentz in his current state.
Yeah, and I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy. I had him as a first-round talent coming out. Just knowing his accuracy in college, again, he was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in all of college football for his last 2 years. It wasn't just a 1-year thing in the Big 12 where it's wide open spaces. Like even when he was backing up Tua, where he got significant playing time, he was even more accurate statistically than Tua was. So he's become a very good passer or a very good thrower of the football in his own right. Character's off the charts. Great physical abilities, particularly with his legs. One of the better runners in terms of quarterbacks with the ball in his hands outside of probably Lamar. Like he's probably the most dominant runner that I've seen. Like I still remember going back to his freshman year at Alabama where they were running like option with him because he still wasn't really developed as a passer. And just him carrying the ball was the most unstoppable play in football that year. It was insane how incredible he was at churning out yards. It's just incredibly strong lower body. So I'm I'm really big on Jalen Hurts. Really, really big. And I think he acquitted himself well against the Packers. The pressure was relentless because they were behind. Took 3 sacks there, and as a result, his passer rating under pressure was like 15 or 16. It was pretty low because again, they just were sending the hounds after him. He was getting blitzed like crazy. But when he was not pressured, he had almost a perfect passer rating. So again, if you can protect him or at least give him some avenues to escape so that he can run to throw, like his touchdown, his really nice touchdown throw that he had. Again, he was able to find an avenue of escape, find a lane, get out in space, and throw a really nice ball down the field for a score. If you can do that, I think he can be a very, very good quarterback for you. But you got to protect him for at least 2 seconds because that was also a big problem with Wentz is he was not very good under pressure at all. They couldn't pass protect, and it was just making his problems even worse. So going forward, number one priority.
There's a stat coming out of the broadcast that this one just killed me. I had to replay it and make sure that I heard it correctly. Wentz's 10th consecutive game that he's been sacked at least 3 times.
It's been a bad year.
30 sacks in 10 games and more actually because they didn't stop at 3, some of those defenses. And I was just like, oh man, if you're, look, sacks come in bunches, and we've all seen really good quarterbacks take a handful of sacks in a game, 4 or 5. They're just those days that it doesn't work out and you spin left and you should have spun right. And I get it. But when you're talking about 10 consecutive games, we're 13 games into the season, that he's taken basically 3 sacks at least every outing, you just start to talk about sacks as impact plays. Sacks have a large influence on whether or not the drive continues. And if you're taking 3 of them per game, every game for 10 straight games, it really is having an overall sort of wet blanket effect on your offense that is hard to counteract. It's almost like turnovers, right? If you have 2 turnovers a game for 10 straight games, you're probably not going to win most of those games. You have 3 sacks for 10 straight games, your chances of winning those games are going down.
And that's a big reason why he got benched, is because he was constantly, like, it's not even like all those sacks were on the offensive line. A significant number of them were on Wentz himself, running himself into pressure, holding the ball for too long. There's I think when I charted it, there was like 5 or 6 turnovers this year just from him holding the ball for too long and refusing to give up and just throw it away or just get down. And so that's been a major problem for him. And luckily, for the Eagles, all the sacks that Jalen Hurts took, none of them were his fault. That was just, bad offensive line play. He wasn't running himself into pressure. He had honestly a much better feel for pressure than Carson did, as you said. So I think if there's any quarterback on the roster that they can make this work with this bad of an offensive line, or at least this banged up of an offensive line, it's Jalen Hurts, because at least he still can navigate a messy pocket. Carson, at this point, I can't think of a single thing he's good at, like at all.
No, he's showing it immediately, which is the problem. Like literally 1 second after the snap, he's looking skittish. He puts his head down. He starts darting around. Like the play's essentially over at that point. He's not even looking downfield at his options, certainly not going through his reads. It's a tremendous transformation from the Carson Wentz we saw a couple of years ago. So, and, on the other side, if you flip the mirror around, it's, Aaron Rodgers, who looks as cool as a cucumber. Didn't help that Philadelphia gave him a million years. I wrote a million years in the notes. It was 5.45 seconds actually to throw on the play where he found Tanyan for a score. 5.45 seconds is twice the average that a quarterback's going to get to throw in this league. You cannot give a guy like Rodgers that kind of time. But when he's got it, and even when he doesn't, he looks extremely comfortable. He's just flipping it out there this year. And he looks relaxed as ever, which is amazing. What Rodgers is doing this year is MVP type stuff. He could very well win the MVP this year. I think it's strongly between him and Mahomes, especially with Russell Wilson faltering on and off over the last month. But Rodgers is just such a study in poise and mastery of the offense at this point, and his connection with Devontae Adams. We talk about it every week, but they were backed up in their own end zone. He just hung out in the end zone, no worries about pressure, threads a dime to Adams, of course, for 40 yards.
Such a good ball. I don't know how it got in there. I mean, it must have grazed the fingertips of two Eagles on the way there.
Right, but he threw it as if he had not a care in the world. Like it was a walk in the park. He's in his own end zone. He gets 40 yards. Not cushion, not a little breathing room, 40 yards. They start basically at midfield after that throw. And it didn't even look hard. And it's a very difficult play to make in the NFL. 3rd and 3. He just lobs it to Lazard for like 20 plus yards. Effortless. It's just staggering the amount of ease he has playing quarterback in the NFL right now. It just doesn't even look hard. And it's one of the hardest things to do in the world. And that's just stunning.
One of my favorite tweets from all of Eagles Twitter. By the way, if you guys have never checked out Eagles Twitter during an Eagles game, it's phenomenal. It's the best place on the internet. It's so good. Between Kist and Solak and Brandon Lee Gouton and all the Eagles fans, it's hilarious. That and Seahawks Twitter are the two best. But our buddy Brandon Lee Gouton had a very chilling, I'll say, tweet. And EJ, you're a draft guy, so let me know what you think about this. He just tweeted out Jordan Matthews over Devontae Adams, JJ Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf, Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. Those are all three receivers that are inarguably top 10. Some would say all of them are top 5 even at this point that the Eagles had a shot at. They drafted none of them.
Yeah, it's a thing with certain organizations. We talk about typically the organizations that do one position particularly well. We talk about Pittsburgh with wide receivers is a perfect example, right? It just pretty much everything they draft turns to gold.
Yeah.
And then, the darker side of that, the flip side of that coin is franchises that draft certain positions that cannot seem to get it right. And I don't think any of those players is bad in their own right. Like, I thought Arcega-Whiteside had a role. I still think he does. Should he been drafted where he was? No. We both like Jalen Reagor and think he's a tremendously capable receiver. When you compare him to I would say, runaway offensive rookie of the year, it doesn't look very good.
I don't think either one of us had Reagor over Jefferson in our rankings either. Like, I think I had Reagor top 7, but Jefferson was
I would
4.
not say we had Reagor over Jefferson, but like Rager's not a bad receiver, and that's not to say these guys are bad players. The opportunity cost is pretty stark there. And being a Chicago fan, I'll talk about Chicago drafting quarterbacks, right? They just don't do it right. And I understand that. But it is very frustrating when you see other franchises that seemingly have those positions dialed. Like they just can't miss at inside linebacker or defensive line or, wide receiver in the Pittsburgh case. Like there are just certain franchises that fully understand certain positions and what they need and, quite frankly, what will work with their system or what works in their stable, what complements what they already have. And then there are folks that, are doing the other thing.
Yeah. Like the Bears are good at drafting corners.
They do okay like the corner. I would say outside corner better than nickel corner, okay. For sure.
More than okay.
But yeah, no, I don't know that every franchise has that, but there are certain franchises that just don't miss. It's pretty much everybody they grab turns into a decent player in their system. It reminds me of when Mike Shanahan was running the Broncos, right? They could draft anything at running back. Anybody at running back, and he'd be a 1,000-yard rusher because they understood what was workable in their system and the traits that they needed. And they got several players who were, tremendously low on everybody else's board and turned them immediately into 1,000-yard rushers, 3 in a row. So it's an understanding of need and value and fit.
Speaking of undervalued running backs turning into gold, Aaron Jones, man, every single week.
Now you say undervalued, and I say he was my lead. He was the picture I chose, as a matter of fact, on my UDFA offense summary for that year that I wrote for Windy City Gridiron. He was the guy that I actually put up as the top image and said, I pick one UDFA from each position that I thought was going to be successful. And Aaron Jones was the guy that year, or lower drafted or UDFA. So I've been a huge Aaron Jones fan. He was one of the first players. I have a soft spot in my heart for Aaron Jones for multiple reasons, not only because he's a tremendous player, but he's actually one of the first players that reached out to me directly on Twitter when I posted something nice about him and said, hey, man, you the real one, appreciate the love, whatever. And this, again, is from a guy that wasn't getting a ton of love from draft Twitter. But couldn't be happier for that guy. He is a tremendous talent. He is in the right place. He's in the right system at the right time. Plays hard, works hard. It shows on the field. Philip Lindsay was another one that I had that I believed in that, again, got his opportunity. It's all about opportunity and fit. And both of those guys have been tremendously productive in their respective positions and now look like, some of the biggest steals going. But I was ahead on both of those guys, so I'm pretty happy about that. And Aaron Jones, super, super nice individual.
We always talk about, not paying running backs. Like, draft them, use them, don't pay them. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to let them not pay him, because Aaron Rodgers, I should say, was a big factor in pushing Jones to get playing time in the McCarthy era before LaFleur even got there. And I remember in Jones's rookie training camp, Rodgers came out publicly and said, hey, we got something here in this Aaron Jones kid. And he was like 4th on the depth chart at the time. And he was a huge proponent in Green Bay media of just driving the Aaron Jones train. Ended up making the roster. Anytime he got on the field, Aaron wanted to target him. He's like, I want to get this guy touches and show what he can do. And he's just feeding him the ball, especially as a receiver. And then a couple of years ago is when he really had that big breakout when they finally actually started feeding him. And it seemed like he was getting 2 touchdowns a game. And I think Aaron Rodgers loves Aaron Jones because he just makes life so much easier on Rodgers in terms of just constantly churning out yards on the ground, giving him manageable third downs, giving him manageable second downs, which is like when you look at the statistics, like that is when Aaron gets the most out of like those free plays where he gives hard counts where it's like, hey, minimum, I'm going to get a first down on second and short anyway because you jumped, and then he'll take a shot on second and short. So Aaron Jones is a big factor in the running game, making Rodgers' own play style more effective. He's good in pass pro. Again, he's good as a receiver. I don't think Rodgers is going to let the front office let Aaron Jones walk because he's probably his favorite running back he's ever worked with. And he's worked with a lot of good ones.
Yeah, he's up there for sure. And one of the things that you pointed out is his versatility, right? That he is a modern NFL running back. He can make a lot out of the touches he gets in the run game, which is de-emphasized but still important. He is a tremendous pass receiver, and he is an excellent blocker, which, look, Rodgers is starting to care about a little bit more. He's always cared about it a bit. He's caring about it a little bit more late in his career. You don't want to get pounded on a weekly basis, and your running back being able to do the right blitz pickup at the right time and effectively execute it is a big deal. The fact that he can do all of those things, that he's a bit of a jack of all trades, plays with a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't drafted, like all of those things are pretty tremendous. But look, his run at the end of the game is supposed to be for a game-sealing first down, but no, he's not satisfied with that. He turns it into this crazy, ridiculous long touchdown, 2:45 to go in the fourth quarter. You know, that's the difference between like, oh, it's good enough and we can probably, run 3-4 more plays and kneel this down. No, we're just going to put points on the board and that's it. We're going home with the win, right?
Yeah. And I think in the following series, that's where Darnell Savage, another favorite of the pod, got his diving interception. He's having a pretty nice year as well. I remember when he was coming out, we were both kind of like Eddie Jackson 2.0, and maybe he's not quite Eddie yet, but he certainly shows the traits that Eddie does in terms of being able to break on the ball in a short area.
I'd say this year he's having a better year than Eddie, and I know that's heresy, but Eddie's having a down year. I just talked about this on a previous podcast, and Eddie deserves a little more scrutiny than he's getting. He got paid. He's got a great contract.
Particularly as a tackler.
He's a tremendous player.
Yeah.
He is not making a difference this year. And some of that's because people don't target him, but more of it is because when they do, they're getting a whole lot more out of it. They're getting about 20 plus percentage points better completion this year than last year. So Eddie's play's fallen off a little bit, and Savage is holding steady or going the other way. So it's a lot closer than a lot of people would think just based on name recognition.
Yeah, Eddie's tackling in particular, I think, has kind of reared its ugly head. I mean, it was a problem when he was coming out of Bama, but he was so good at getting turnovers and everything like that. Like I even said in my mock draft that year, it's like, I know he's going to miss tackles. That's what he does. But he's also going to put points on the board, so I'm willing to deal with it. And there's been a little bit more take than give this year, I'll say that.
Yeah, I think that's a very apropos statement is, it's his tackling's a little worse. The turnovers, which, look, are fickle. Sometimes they come in bunches and sometimes they go in bunches. But he's had very few sort of impact plays that way. And then when you're letting folks go in terms of being the sort of middle option to stop that long run for the ball carry and you're not executing that very well, all of a sudden it all just hits a little bit differently.
Yeah, but either way, Darnell Savage, great player, really coming into his own. And that'll do it for Eagles-Packers. Some things to look forward to this coming week with Jalen Hurts getting his first actual start against a very good Saints defense. And the Packers I can't remember who Green Bay's playing this week, but I'm sure they're just going to kick the crap out of them like normal because that's just kind of what they do now. They're one of the three best teams in the league. But that being said, let's move on to Giants-Seahawks, one of the biggest upsets of the week, unless you're a Giants fan. But, man, hell of a game here. Defensive battle. The thing that really jumps out to me in terms of why the Giants were able to win this game was third down defense. They held the Hawks to 30% on third down, which was ninth worst in the league for this week. But overall, if you look at overall season averages, that would be the worst season average in the league, like 30%. Like that's a very, very, very bad third down conversion rate. Lots of sacks, lots of pressure. There was a 3rd and 2 where that defensive line just bowed up and was able to stop Carson short. They only got in the red zone. Seattle did. They only got in the Giants' red zone one time the entire game, which was 4th worst in the league for the week. So great effort by that Giants defense, especially on third down, and they really, really carried New York to a win here.
Yeah, it was a combination of the Giants, who we talked about at the top of the podcast, playing very well as a team, and Russell Wilson playing very out of character. Let's just put it that way. Russell has been a machine. Living in the Pacific Northwest, I've been witness to it firsthand. He's been tremendously reliable as a quarterback in terms of what he is going to provide, the opportunities he is going to hit, the opportunities he's going to create with his legs. I think there's sort of a patented Russell Wilson pivot move to get away from the pass rush. He was the first guy I know to do that, to sort of feel backside pressure and spin hard to that side, buy himself some more time. He didn't do a whole lot of any of that in this game. Looked sort of very unceremoniously lost, which Seattle fans are, I'll tell you, based on all the chatter around here this week, really not used to. That is a new thing for them. Seeing Russell play at a sort of human or below average level is not a thing that Seahawks fans have seen a lot of, and it's very disturbing to them. But good credit to the Giants for playing a strong team game. Russell was not able to salvage the Seahawks' hopes the way he typically does, with a couple of long shots to DK or a couple of crushing, Chris Carson runs. It just didn't add up for them, and they came up on the short side of the stick to the Giants, which is not something you would have predicted, probably ever this season. Certainly not earlier this season when the Seahawks were playing very well and the Giants were playing very poorly. But even recently, I think that would have been a bet you could have made money on, that the Giants were going to beat the Hawks in Seattle. Interestingly enough, one of the guys we mentioned at the top of the podcast, Jabril Peppers, was involved in 2 consecutive plays that we couldn't ignore, and so we're going to make them both sort of a joint bootleg shot of the week nominee, because literally Jabril Peppers deals one out. Now this is early in the first quarter, 13-11 left in the first quarter, so game's just getting started. Russell Wilson hangs one to Tyler Lockett, and Jabril Peppers nails him just on the sideline, full coming from the safeties. Just smacks him. Like, all credit to Lockett. He hangs on, completed pass, first down, nice play. The very next play, Chris Carson, short side, cuts it back, buries Jabril Peppers on the run. This is the very next play, so it's about 12-ish minutes into first quarter. Just bangs Jabril Peppers to the turf, runs him right over. So very interesting that the same player on 2 consecutive plays, deals out a bootleg shot of the week nominee and then becomes the victim of one on the very next play.
And Jabril got Carson back later in the game too, and I'll kind of talk about their overall defensive game plan because it factors in there. But he came on a blitz through the B gap, and Carson was picking him up, and he put Carson on his ass. And that he was thinking about when he got buried early in the game. He's like, I'm going to give it back to him. And he did. And that actually flushed Wilson into another sack. I think it was like the second time he got sacked in the game. Jabril was throwing his body all over the place in this game. He had a hell of a game. Actually, I think he finished that play for a sack too. I don't think 49 got it. I think Jabril actually did wind back and get it. But again, had a hell of a day. I do want to talk a little bit schematically about what the Giants defense did, because you mentioned how they were able to kind of like keep Russ from spinning out and going wide. When you look at how New York rushed the passer, Patrick Graham came up, he's the defensive coordinator for the Giants. Patrick Graham came up with an excellent plan where he's like, look, Russ doesn't like to step up from pressure because, again, he's a shorter guy. He doesn't want to have to put himself behind all those big bodies because it obscures his vision. It kind of makes him guess a little bit. Like, Drew Brees is the only shorter quarterback I can remember that was totally fine with stepping up behind a guard that was 6'7" and being totally cool with it. Russ actually prefers that you come at him inside so that he can then kind of spin out of it and go wide, because then he's got full field of vision, he's out in space, he's athletic, he can make throws on the run, all that kind of stuff. So their plan was, hey, we're going to rush him wide, and we're going to have guys like Jabril Peppers blitzing up the gut to catch him when he steps up. And that was how that sack happened, was he couldn't step up. He had to try to go wide. 49 flushed him even more, and then Jabril kind of wheeled back from the inside to get him again. Or the last Leonard Williams sack, they were running a TE stunt, and Williams was playing end, even though he's an interior guy, but he was playing end. And then you have on a TE stunt, means tackle end stunt, the tackle kind of knifes through the B gap and then shoves the tackle really deep in the pocket so that Wilson can't escape wide. He's just sitting there waiting for him, while Leonard Williams would then loop back inside and be the free rusher. So it's all about creating wide contain while having pressure on the inside. That was how they designed it, was we're not going to be coming off the edges. We're going to be waiting on the edges and then bringing pressure up the gut. They did it over and over and over again, and it worked because Russell hates that. It's kind of his one weakness in terms of being against pressure, is not being able to escape out wide. And then kind of tying into my overall point about third down defense. There was a third and 6, third and 4, something around there, about 9 minutes left in the first quarter. And this was also another thing, was showing one coverage before the snap and then giving you a different one and making Russell hold the ball while you bring that interior pressure. They showed man cover 1, like it was just going to be man across the board, single high safety, rushing 5, and then they dropped out. Matty F. Brown on Twitter, a huge shout out to him. He did a great breakdown of this play. It was kind of an amoeba look. You rush to contact, you occupy all the blockers, you back out. You have guys sitting in hole zones over the middle to take away the slants, and then you have another linebacker, again, looping inside, bringing that interior pressure. He can't go anywhere. He can't escape wide, and that gets a sack on 3rd down. So brilliant defensive game plan, playing contain and bringing interior pressure. I would imagine we're going to see a lot more teams do that because over the years, that's consistently been the one thing that really slows Russell down.
Yeah, that breakdown by Matty F. Brown was great. I saw that, and the first thing I thought about when I saw that was our conversation a couple of weeks ago about Miami's zero blitz, right? Mm-hmm. And that Miami's going to bring those guys to contact, and the first time they get slowed down, those guys back out and fill the lanes, and the other guys keep going, because if you've already occupied the blocker, you're not going to get there. You back out and see if you can get your hands up and stymie one of the passing lanes, and that's exactly what that looked like to me, just on a TV angle. But we need to talk about a couple of Senior Bowl alumni that we both liked. Carter Coughlin got his pressure on Russell Wilson, so good to see Carter Coughlin getting his groove on for the Giants and starting to contribute there. Very versatile player. Interviewed him a couple of times during the Senior Bowl week. Really enjoyed conversations with him, his perspective, what he was trying to get better at. Found out later that he was sick as a dog the entire week. Had no idea. Was throwing up most of the week. Would puke and then go to practice, and you would have had no idea talking to Carter Coughlin. Was extremely patient, thoughtful in his responses. Didn't find out till later that he was super sick the entire week, so big shout out to Carter Coughlin. And then Darnay Holmes, one of your favorites, got a pick off the tip drill in this one. Kind of became the Senior Bowl alumni game, but a couple of guys that are giving good contributions to the Giants that were both at the Senior Bowl. And we talked about Leonard Williams earlier. Ended up 2 sacks in this one off the stunt that you were talking about, one earlier. And he's really found his groove over the last 4 or 5 weeks, but a guy we didn't necessarily think was going to be a huge contributor. And he's been as much a part of that Giants pass rush as anybody. And honestly, if they need anything in this coming draft, they really need some edge pressure, right? The Giants were for years, they stocked up on edge pressures. They had JPP, they had Strahan, they had all those guys, right? They always seem to have plenty of edge rushers. And it seems like they could use one right now. They're getting decent interior pressure. They're getting pressure through scheme. It'd be really nice to have that sort of ace exterior edge rusher on this team to add just one more element and give opposing quarterbacks even less time.
That's why I'm kind of surprised they didn't go after Yannick when he was on the trade block, because I felt like he
or Everson Griffin
there. Or Everson. Well, maybe they want somebody younger, because I think they know, like,
true.
Well, is at the time they're like, look, we're not competing this year. Like Everson, it kind of made sense why he went to the Cowboys, because they're like, oh, we're gonna make a playoff push, all that kind of stuff. But Yannick's a little bit younger. There are some edge guys in the upcoming draft class that I like, but the thing is, we have no idea where they're going to pick, because they can be anywhere from the top 10 to the low 20s at this point. Like, the NFC East is wide open, so I think the Giants are going to be
if they keep winning, it's going to have a serious effect, for sure.
It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to talk about the Giants a lot in the spring. And so, yeah, overall, really, really entertaining game, even though not very high scoring. I think it created some more questions for Seahawks fans, because it always seems like, 2 steps forward, one step back with that team. It's like, oh, we finally fixed the defense, and now the offense is struggling. Russell's had kind of a rough, 2 months here. So the Seahawks never seem to be fully online offensively or defensively at the same time. Maybe they can get it together by January, but still an immensely entertaining game. I've really enjoyed kind of watching the Giants over the last month, and curious to see where they go from here. Before we get to our third kind of main highlighted game of the week, I do want to thank our sponsor for the day, Manscaped, the best, most complete collection of products out of any men's grooming provider. I've had multiple iterations of their famous lawnmower body trimmer over the years, and their newest update, the Lawnmower 3.0, is by far their best one yet. It's waterproof, it's got a replaceable ceramic blade with their skin-safe technology to stop all those painful nicks and cuts. It's got a really powerful 9,000 RPM motor as well to cut through even the thickest of hair. I use it weekly, and I also use their nose hair trimmer too, the Weed Whacker, because I get crazy nose hair ever since I turned 26. I don't know why that magic number just made my body drastically change, but I hate it, and my knees hurt all the time. So if Manscaped could figure out a fix for that as well, I'd appreciate it. But if you're not in need of any new trimmers right now, but you still want to up your grooming game, or you want to give a gift to someone else during this holiday season that you know they're going to love, Manscaped also offers a wide variety of excellent colognes and body washes and deodorants that all smell fantastic and leave your skin feeling amazing. Highly recommend you get the body wash, by the way. It is awesome. One of my singular favorite smelling body washes that I've ever had, and my wife loves it too, just for that reason. So if you're interested in the Lawnmower 3.0, the Weed Whacker, any of the other great grooming products they offer, head on over to manscaped.com and use promo code BOOTLEG for 20% off your order plus free shipping. Again, that is promo code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com for 20% off your order and free shipping. And with that, EJ, let's move on to our final kind of main highlighted game of the week, which is Jaguars-Vikings. Which, to be honest, I did not expect this to be one of the main games we highlighted for the week. I thought this was going to be a blowout. Ended up going to the wire. It's actually an immensely entertaining game. And I will say, once again, Justin Jefferson proving himself to be not just the best rookie receiver, not just maybe the best offensive rookie, maybe one of the best rookie receivers in the history of the sport. Fun fact, before I give you the floor, in his first 12 games, he's got over 1,000 yards. Do you know the other 4 receivers ever to get 1,000 yards in their first 12 games?
I could guess 1 or 2 of them. I absolutely do not know 4 of them.
So it is Marcus Colston, Randy Moss, Anquan Bolden, Odell Beckham Jr. That is the list.
I only got 1 out of the 4.
You had Odell?
Yeah, no, I had Moss.
Oh yeah, I guess he would be the obvious one, but yeah, it is.
Leave it to me to get the obvious one. That's what I'm good for.
Yeah, he's joining elite company there. You could argue Anquan's a Hall of Famer. Randy's obviously a no-brainer. Marcus is probably at least going to end up in the Ring of Honor down in New Orleans. He's gonna own. Well, assuming Michael Thomas passes him at some point, he'll be top 2 in basically every single receiving category in Saints history.
Do you know how many catches Michael Thomas has in his career? This is relevant because he passed a milestone this week.
He's averaging 100 a year for 5 years into his career, so he's got to be over 500 now, I should say.
501 this week.
Yeah.
501 catches for Michael Thomas, which is amazing to me as a draft guy. It seems like I was just looking at his draft profile, but 501 catches already for Michael Thomas. Pretty incredible. And look, a guy that gets volume catches for sure, but I saw the stat from PFF this week, success against man coverage, and you can argue, and rightfully so, Brett, I know you've gone back and forth with PFF about multiple things, but it's a decent basis for conversation. And in terms of success against man coverage, they had the top 5 receivers success rate versus man coverage. And number 2 and number 3 were both Vikings receivers in the entire league. Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson were 2nd and 3rd overall. So just a note to defenses going against Minnesota. Yeah, probably don't want to play a whole lot of man because you're going to get worked.
And ironically, Jacksonville plays more man coverage than anybody else in the league. They were, at least as of a few weeks ago, I don't know what it's at now, but as of a few weeks ago, they were the only team in the league over 50% for man coverage. Like that was what they did, and they stuck to it at all times. And they would get punished repeatedly over and over and over again for it. And this week was no different. They tried to man up Justin Jefferson, and he killed them. Another 100-yard game. Nasty touchdown. on, I don't even know what they call the route, but he was basically selling a deep over and then slammed on the brakes and whipped back to the pylon. I'll have to kind of go through my old my Shanahan playbooks, because he kind of has like a 6-page thing of like just names for every type of route in the West Coast system. So I'm sure I could find it in there. I don't know what they call it offhand, but just such a good sell with the head fake and using a pressure step inside to get the DB to try to undercut it, and then he just slammed on the brakes and lost him. Hell of a route. And I'm gonna say it every week. Justin Jefferson, man, he is one of the best rookies I've ever seen.
You should. He's coming on as hot as anybody has in their entrance in a long, long time. I'll say this as a former Bears fan. Mike Glennon is going to trick somebody into signing him in the offseason, I think. And it's, you look in and he's that tall, sort of statuesque quarterback, throws a decent deep ball. And he came up with
hold on. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? John Elway just shit himself in excitement.
I could totally see that. The Ginger Giraffe goes to Denver. Anyways, he got lucky on a heave that bounced off somebody to Laviska Shenault for a score. Nothing against Laviska, but literally bounced off a defender and Shenault caught it in the end zone. Then they missed the PAT. And the thing that, a lot of PATs have been missed this year, that's not a surprise. They moved them back a couple of years ago. The Jags have had, get this, 6 different kickers this year. As the fan of a franchise that struggled with kickers, like the Bears have, this year been very good with Cairo Santos, and we're all quite pleased about that. Last year, who's it going to be? Is Pinheiro going to do it? And they've gone through some kickers, but they had 2, maybe 3 a year. The Jags have had, I repeat, 6 different kickers this year. It's astounding. So, game started off interestingly, but Colin Johnson is one of those rookies. We talked about a couple of rookies that are sort of putting it together in the second half. Isaiah Simmons, a little bit as he started to get more playing time, has definitely come on. We talked about some of those rookies that just didn't get the early opportunity or took them a little bit longer to break into the lineup. Colin Johnson had a hell of a game for the Jaguars. He was a 5th-round pick. Right, we liked him at the Senior Bowl, tall receiver out of Texas, a little bit limited in his route tree. He's more of a vertical guy down the boundary. He's not really going to make a living between the hash marks for you. But he has a good skill set, and apparently Glennon likes it, because a couple of big completions to Colin Johnson in this one. They used Laviska Shenault out of the backfield straight up, and he had a very explosive rep coming out. This is something we talked about, his versatility in the draft last year, that they were going to have to be creative with him on offense. And then another rookie on the other side of the ball, Cam Dantzler, one of my favorites, ended up being picked to play corner by the Vikings. Picks Glennon off in this one on an underneath route. And turns out that Cam Dantzler is the highest graded rookie over the last 4 weeks. 90.1 grade out of PFF. Again, take PFF grades as you will, but Cam Dantzler is another one of those guys like Colin Johnson that didn't come out blazing like Justin Jefferson. Took a little bit longer to warm up, but over the last 3 to 4 weeks, been having a very good rep and looks like a keeper for the Vikes. So that's good news for them. And then the other thing I really wanted to highlight is on the other side of that Jefferson connection is Kirk Cousins, who takes a lot of crap, and rightfully so. But one of the things that Kirk Cousins does as well as anybody in the league, or I would say better than anybody in the league except for Baker Mayfield, is the hard play action fake. And I mean the hard sell, the good hand work, the tucking the ball away. So defenders have that little bit of pause. He did it 3 times in this game. The first one, I'm sure he did it more than 3 times in this game, but 3 times notably in this game. The first one was a really strong play action pitch rep, and you don't normally see play action on a pitch. Normally you see it on a handoff, but they faked the pitch. Cousins hid the ball, made an easy toss to Thielen in the end zone, the back of the end zone on crossing route for a score. Created all the space he needed, again, off that strong play action. Did it again on the nice little flare to Ham, their fullback for the Vikings TA. for the Vikings TD. And then Cousins generated a ton of pocket space on the touchdown to Jefferson. And again, look at the play again. Watch the play again. A tremendously hard fake. Every defender on the field thinks that Dalvin Cook has the ball. He rolls out and stands there alone, 5 yards separated from every defender, just kind of surveying the field and goes, oh, look, there's Justin Jefferson, and nails him for a touchdown. All three of those plays, those are three of the Vikings TDs. All three of them came off really hard, sharp, well-executed play action. And Cousins, for his many faults, is one of the best in the league at that particular asset.
Yeah, he's actually thrown the second most touchdowns in the league, second only to Aaron Rodgers, who runs a similar system under LaFleur. It's West Coast, it's bootlegs, it's play action. Second most touchdowns to Aaron Rodgers off play action this year. 9.5 yards per attempt and a 114 quarterback rating off play action. Hyper efficient. Deadly with that deep ball, especially when he's given all that space from that hard fake, and you get the end to chase, and he's just kind of rolling out there all by his lonesome. In the Justin Jefferson film room that I'm releasing, I guess by the time
soon.
Well, by the time this podcast is out, it will be out because I'm releasing the Jefferson film room Thursday morning.
You hope.
I hope. You fingers crossed. But one of the first routes I highlight from Jefferson, it's like a double move comeback against Kyle Fuller from the Bears game. It was impeccably run, but part of the reason why that route was allowed forever to develop is because Kirk was rolling out on a bootleg off a good fake, and he had tons of space to just run and wait for Jefferson to get open. So it's a key component of their offense, and they are one of the best in the league at kind of incorporating that. Gary Kubiak's done a great job. Weirdly enough, though, out of all the other top 10 quarterbacks in terms of like number of touchdowns thrown off play action, Kirk is the third lowest in that group in terms of play action percentage. So they don't run it as much as Kubiak has in the past, but when they do,
I was going to say they save it for the touchdowns because they scored 3 touchdowns off it in this game.
Yeah, they hit it. They hit it big. So it's a really nice component. And obviously, when you have a running back like Dalvin, I mean, of course the linebackers are going to chase him,
Yeah, absolutely. Dantzler also recovered a fumble later in the game, so that just sort of adds to his sort of ascension, which is really fantastic for the Vikes. I'm sure they're happy to see it. Glennon found Johnson a couple of more times, including setup for 1st and goal. Robinson pounds it in from there. He's still getting some production. The end of this game was a little weird. The Vikes missed a 51-yarder to win it, and the Jags rallied and actually got in range for one themselves. Just a few seconds left on the clock, and they missed it as well. Overtime was sort of a hodgepodge. Smoot got a really nice sack on Cousins in OT. Glennon throws a bad pick to Harrison Smith. Who knew? For all those waiting to sign Mike Glennon to a rich free agent deal, this is the way it works. Vikings win this one with a field goal, but a strangely entertaining game that had a lot of plays, a lot of contributions from some rookies, some established veterans. Oh, and one thing I have to call out, Cousins did throw a terrible pick 6 to one of my favorite players in the league, Joe Schobert, who has not made a lot of noise for Jacksonville as being a big dollar free agent signing. Made that particular play look easy, and I think the most notable thing from that was how hard his defensive mates rallied and came to celebrate for Schobert. You can tell that he is a leader on that team and that they were so pleased for his success. That doesn't happen with every touchdown or defensive score in this particular case. Everybody on that defensive 11 was next to Joe Schobert, pumping him up. Extremely thrilled that he got his opportunity. Again, turnovers come and go in bunches. Schobert getting the easy pick 6. It just shows what they think of him there. Sort of one of those very sort of underseen pieces in Jacksonville. We talk about Miles Jack. We talk about a lot of the other defensive stars they have. But Joe Schobert, obviously somebody that's really well respected by his defensive teammates down there in Jacksonville.
There is a lot of talent to get excited about there. I think you and I both love DJ Chark. I think Laviska has proven himself to be a very, very nice complementary weapon, both in the air and on the ground. Super explosive with the ball in his hands. I kind of look, because I'm assuming that Doug Marrone is not long for this world. They already got rid of Dave Caldwell.
It'd be nice.
I'm assuming he's not long for this world. So when I look at coaches that are going to be brought in, like this team's going to have a top 5 pick, probably the second overall pick if it keeps going the way they're going, which means they're going to have their pick of quarterbacks not named Trevor Lawrence. You got DJ Chark there, you got Laviska Shenault there, you got a young offensive line that has some nice pieces. Brandon Leonard's arguably the best pass protecting center in the entire league. As well. So he's been kind of a mainstay for them. The defense, as you mentioned, has some nice pieces. Miles Jack and Joe Schobert's a very underrated linebacking core. They just spent a high pick on, who's that corner out of Florida? CJ Henderson, who's unfortunately on IR now. Kayvon Chason has not been productive as a pass rusher, but I think it's because they're playing him out of position. They really need to have him more in like a 3-4 or as a 4-3 Sam. They're trying to play him as a true defensive end, and it's not working. I think they really need to use him like the Dolphins and formerly the Patriots use Kyle Van Noy, and he could be very, very good in that role. But again, I digress with that. But I still love him as a talent. So there is talent here. And when I look at coaches that can come in and replace Doug Marrone, I kind of am zeroed in on Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for Carolina, formerly the offensive coordinator for LSU. And then before that, he was an assistant under Sean Payton. He's kind of seen as like potentially the new Sean McVay in terms of young offensive minds. And the reason why I think he fits well with Jacksonville is A, I think he could develop whatever young quarterback they take after Trevor Lawrence pretty well. And B, when I look at the weapons that they have to work with, I think he can make use of Laviska very well, like he uses Curtis Samuel. I think he can use DJ Chark like he uses DJ Moore. And we've seen that he's gotten the best out of Teddy as well. So if you give him a Justin Fields or a Wilson or whoever your QB2 is, I think he could really develop a young quarterback as well. I kind of like Joe Brady to Jacksonville. Is there anybody other than like the obvious Eric Bieniemy or Brian Dable that you think would fit better?
No, I'm going to go with the obvious. I'm going to take Eric Bieniemy because I think if he is sold on whoever he thinks he can get at number 2 for the quarterback, if he likes Justin Fields, right? Because an offensive guy like Bieniemy is absolutely going to have something at quarterback wherever he goes. And let's say there are openings in places like, I don't know, Los Angeles, where Justin Herbert's there and he's got a bird in the hand. He's likely to take that because he knows what he can create with that. But if he likes Justin Fields, there's a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. You've got James Robinson, you've got Chark, who's tremendous. What they really need is a little bit more offensive line depth and a playmaking tight end. Somebody that can stretch that seam in the Kelsey type mold. But he's got all kinds of receivers, Colin Johnson developing. We already talked about Chark. There's a couple other guys in the mix there. Laviska is his wild card. He can play him, the same way they play Curtis Samuel in Panthers land. You were talking about Joe Brady. It's a very similar role. You give him a little bit more interior offensive line depth or a really high quality tackle, and you give him a playmaking tight end. If he likes Justin Fields, I think Bieniemy could make a ton of noise in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited to see where they go with this because the cupboard is not bare.
Not even close.
And I know we like to talk about the 2017 roster and how it's gone, which it is, but they've replaced it with some high-quality players. There's not enough of them yet, and the coaching isn't there yet. But this is
not that far off.
They're not that far off. That's what I keep trying to tell people.
They need a quarterback, and they need a couple of key pieces on offense, but I don't think as many as people think. And you could see a really tremendous turnaround from them offensively. And look, offense is the straw that stirs the drink in the NFL right now. If you have a functioning offense that is putting up between 20 and 30 points a game, you can win a lot of games.
Yeah, I'm kind of stoked to see where they go. And I think they're going to be, again, just like the Giants, another one of those teams that we're talking about a lot in the spring because their potential for a bounce back, a very quick bounce back, is pretty tremendous here. What do you say we get into fourth and long, since we've been going about an hour so far? We should probably get into this. We'll start off with Saints and Falcons. EJ, what was your main takeaway from this game?
Ooh, main takeaway is tough. Younghoe Koo is a really good kicker. Don't I say that every week about the Falcons? He is. He's a really good kicker. My first takeaway was do not lose outside contain on Taysom Hill. Holy crap. If you do that, quick, you are really sunk. 43-yard scramble was the longest of his career to start this game off. Falcons are playing much, much better. We talked about that last week. They're playing somewhat predictably. The Michael Thomas catching 500 balls was definitely something that stuck out to me. That's just a function of the pass-happy NFL that we live in. There was a need that popped up to me because we actually talked about this early on for the Falcons before they fired the coaching staff. There was a game, and I forget which week it was, where we said over and over again, man, the Falcons cannot set the edge, right? They kept giving up the soft edge. They kept giving up like quality runs to the edge over and over again. And we identified that as a weakness. They had that weakness again this week. They cannot set the edge. And I said, man, the Falcons need an edge setter in the draft. Even if it's not a pass rusher, guy like Jonathan Allen, big, one of those stout Alabama defensive ends that, does not let people by, doesn't necessarily generate a ton of pressure off the edge, but can stand up a tackle, can stand up a tight end, maybe a double, stick an arm out and make sure that back is not getting to the outside edge because the Falcons are getting crushed on that again this week. So they need an edge setter really badly in the draft. Other than that, Gage made a couple of really nice plays in a row, picked up a touchdown
on
this one for the Falcons.
Russell Gage is one of my favorites, man. He's so underrated.
Very under the radar, especially on that receiving core. And why wouldn't you be? You got Ridley and Jones, bunch of other guys that have made plays this year. But Gage has come up, not every week, but consistently enough that you should know his name. He is one of those guys that when his ticket comes up, and he may go somewhere else because, again, his opportunities are never going to be tremendous so long as Julio and Calvin are there. A guy that could make some noise, more noise elsewhere than he does on the Falcons just because of the roster depth. But Falcons came up short at the end of this one. They were within a Hail Mary. They couldn't complete it. An interesting game, but nothing to really make me write home about. What did you have?
My main thing is like, look, I get it. They're kicking the tires on Taysom Hill. And he's fine. Like, he's okay as a pass. Like, I think he's gotten better over the last couple weeks as a passer. And obviously, he's electric on the ground. But to me, I know what the standard is for quarterback play for this offense. And even though he's improving, I don't think he meets that standard. And to be honest, I kind of think that Jameis has a higher ceiling in this offense, even though Taysom's a better athlete. I think Jameis has a higher ceiling in this offense because I think he's just a better passer. It's not always going to go to the right team, but he's a better passer. And Drew's going to be back in a couple weeks. I know they're not going to start Jameis at all. But going forward, I want them to re-sign Jameis because I think I've seen enough of Taysom to know, like, look, he's quality backup. You can bring him in for some packages. For 16 games, like if you want this to be a thing in 2021 for 16 games, that I highly question. I would rather roll the dice with Jameis.
I don't know, because Jameis's tendency, you mentioned it, to give the ball away. If Peyton could cut that down and limit that, maybe cut it in half, which would be reasonable.
I think he can.
Again, if he can, I think that absolutely Jameis has so much more in the tank as a passer than Taysom. But Taysom has gotten better. You mentioned it. The Taysom to Thomas connection is big. I think if a guy like Michael Thomas had been out like he was at the beginning of the season and you were starting Taysom Hill, I think at that point you're sunk or much more one-dimensional, that much easier to defend. Because, look, Taysom to Thomas, so smooth to start off the second half, looked like a very natural passer. I actually had to look and make sure that Drew hadn't come back into the lineup because that first pass to Michael Thomas, on time, on target, well delivered. And he is getting better, but I'm with you that Jameis's passing ceiling is higher, but the caveat was an equal number of touchdowns and interceptions. That's not acceptable. If you could cut that in half, then you've got something. Then you've got a sustainable option. So both guys have their sort of faults. Taysom's shown me more than I actually gave him credit for in these last couple of starts. I really thought he was much more heavily one-dimensional. And yes, I scouted him coming out of college, and yes, I saw those plays. But at a pro level, I really thought he was legs over arm all the way. And he showed more balance with the arm than I thought. That being said, am I, penciling Taysom in as my 16-game starter in a passing league? Not yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see what they decided to do in the offseason, because I think Taysom and Jameis are both free agents in the offseason. So maybe they bring neither of them back. Who knows? Man, they are up against the cap. They are up against the cap. Maybe it's 2020 or bust for them, which I could see it. They have a very, very good team, arguably the best offensive line, one of the best defenses, and when Drew's back, he's a highly efficient quarterback. If they win the Super Bowl this year, maybe they just bring none of them back and they blow the whole thing up, because they've just been kind of ring or nothing for the last 5 years now. But we'll see what happens. Very intrigued by that. Why don't we move on to Bengals Dolphins, which I feel really, really bad for Brian Allen, because he keeps having to face all these elite defenses and just getting his ass kicked every single week. The Dolphins are right up there with Pittsburgh in terms of defensive metrics in virtually every single category except for run defense. But in terms of pass defense, I mean, they are right there. Like points allowed, completion percentage allowed, passer rating, turnovers, sacks, all of it. Like they are a suffocating pass defense. And they were just hitting and picking off Allen all day long.
Yeah, Xavier Howard makes him pay early with the interception. His 8th of the year, that is leading the league. Xavier Howard, not to be ignored. I know you made a tweet about this, comparing him to Stephon Gilmore last year and the fact that he's getting absolutely no buzz as sort of defensive player of the year. He should be. Xavier Howard has been putting up numbers down in South Beach, and if you're not paying attention, you ought to be. Myles Gaskin was back this week, takes a tiny little screen and turns it into a big first down for Miami, gets them out of the shadow of their own goal line. Myles Gaskin, just one of those players that I got to watch as a Husky, thought he had a bunch of potential, and I'm just happy every time that guy comes in and makes a bunch of contributions to Miami, because he's just one of those guys that's better than his pedigree. Like he makes more out of the touches he gets than a lot of other guys. And Tua went off script later and found him running for a deep gain, big gain down the seam. He just works in this offense. Doesn't mean they don't need an upgrade at running back. Just means that Myles Gaskin is a guy that can contribute for them. Gesicki, we talked about Gesicki a bunch at the beginning of this season, and he first off got found in the end zone for a TD. Tua was 5 of 6 off that drive. So Tua's getting in shape. Gesicki is then, and then later in the third quarter, midway through the third quarter, Gesicki makes an insane one-handed catch. There's no other way to describe that catch. Mm-hmm. Just reaches up in a sort of, I'm doing a jumping jack X, and stabs it with one hand, brings it in through contact. Tremendous player. Again, there's a lot of ways to win in this league, and people look at Gesicki and they say, oh, he's not super fast, or he's not this, or he's not that.
He can jump, though.
Mike Gesicki is a very effective weapon. You need to know how to use him. No, he's not as fast as some of the other seam-splitting tight ends. He's extremely tall. He's got great reach, knows how to jump, tremendous set of hands, can take contact. You can win with a guy like that. So Gesicki just sort of reminded us that he's a very dangerous player. 2 other things that stuck out from this game. Dolphins' red zone offense needs work. The Bengals held them to 3 multiple times in this game. And for all the things that we say Tua is good at, that he is indeed good at, that led off his scouting report, super quick decisions, accurate with the football, great in the short, quick passing game. Like, those are all things that should work very well in the red zone. And right now for the Dolphins, they're struggling in the red zone. So need to have a little bit of overhaul with play calling, a little bit of improvement on execution, as is typically the case, and they need to get that tuned up, because if they're going to make any noise, or certainly if they're going to compete for the AFC East title, can't be getting 3 every time you go in the red zone. You got to be scoring touchdowns more often than you're kicking the field goal. And the second one was a bootleg shot of the week nominee, an AFC East transplant, Shaq Lawson. Big blindside sack, about 7:35 in the fourth quarter. That was a game-turning play. Nice impact. So Shaq Lawson gets the nod for a bootleg shot of the week. That Dolphins defense, you talked about it earlier. The rush is crushing that line.
Yeah.
We have talked.
6 sacks.
And later, the news gets even worse. The Bengals placed Jonah Williams on an IR. He is their arguably top offensive lineman. That just spells doom. They were bad before. You remove the best piece. The rest of this season for Bengals fans is going to be rough on offense, because your line was terrible and it just got worse.
And the Jonah one was unfortunate. It was one of those, a guy's trying to make a sack and his momentum carries him and he whips into the leg. As soon as you saw it, you knew it was probably an ACL. It's so unfortunate, because he's already dealt with some injuries in his career. I think he tore a pec in his rookie year. It's either a pec or an elbow.
Yeah, he had a really early injury in his rookie year, so he got very little exposure.
So he's been dealing with a lot throughout his career, and I felt so bad for him. And again, I felt bad for Brandon Allen, just getting crushed all day. The 6 sacks. Finley came in, threw a few passes, was also under pressure, threw a pick. My one last note I want to give. He also got sacked. My one note, I want to give a shout out to Kyle Van Noy, won AFC Defensive Player of the Week, and deservedly so. Had 3 sacks on this game. Heavily contributing on stunts and blitzes. Again, he's playing that kind of role that I really want Caleb Chase on to play in Jacksonville, as a kind of move him all over the place chess piece. Play the run on the edge, but not necessarily being a pass rusher. Van Noy had another really nice run stop against Gio as well. You can drop him into cover, you can blitz him. He's great on stunts like that. That's the mold that I want for these 240-pound, hybrid kind of guys. Like, I want them to be Kyle Van Noy. And Brian Flores knows how to use those kind of guys. And again, 3 sacks this week, a bunch of tackles, just hell of a day for him. So shout out to Kyle Van Noy. Next game we'll talk about Rams Cardinals. The Cliff Kingsbury offense has had a little bit rough lately. The run game has been excellent. Pass game, not so much.
Yeah, Arizona's slumping a little bit. We'll go to the last point first here so we don't bury the lead. They're 500, 6-6, but they've lost their last 3 in a row. So if you're 6-6 and you've lost your last 3 in a row, you're not trending the right direction. And we're certainly more hopeful about the Cardinals earlier in the season. It's not that they can't turn it around, or they don't have the talent, or they don't know how. But yeah, the shine is off the Cardinals at the moment. They've had some bad beats over the last 3 weeks. They're going to have to turn that around if they want to make some noise, because, excuses don't change the win-loss column at the end of the season. And they're at one of those sort of tipping point places. Do they sort of win out, or, win 3 of their last 4 and march out on a high note? Or do they continue and lose 3 of their last 4, come out, 1-4 out of the last 4 games? And really sort of limp to the finish, which would be a disappointment with all the talent on this roster and certainly the expectations coming into the season. But a couple of highlights out of this one. Darnold gets a sack on Murray, which is always tough to do. Kyler Murray, one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the league. Donald's 11th sack. The idea that a guy that plays primarily interior defensive line as a defensive tackle has 11 sacks going into week 13 is staggering. I mean, it's just another credit to Donald's prodigious talent. That's just one of those numbers that makes you stand up and go, wait, is that right? And the answer is yes, right. And yes, they play him on the edge some, and yes, he's gotten a bunch of his sacks there, but regardless of where you play him, he's a force, and having 11 sacks at this point is just a huge credit to Aaron Donald. Couple of others that popped out in this game, the Darrell Henderson and really the Rams backs in general were the offensive mainstay. We talk every week about Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and all the guys on the receiving core, but really the Rams were making hay off passes to the outside to their backs. Big gains off short throws to the running backs. And we saw Darrell Henderson do it a couple of times in this game. That's different, but it's encouraging to me that, again, Sean McVay is adaptable enough to say, hey, maybe their pass coverage is a little bit better this week and we can exploit the edges with the backs. And they do that. They are an amoeba-like offense that gives them the flexibility to win on any given week. And that is encouraging for Rams fans for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Kyler's shoulder. That's kind of my main takeaway. Is ever since he hurt it, he has not thrown for 200 yards.
Yeah, as a guy that has done nasty things to both shoulders,
it's not right. It's not right.
I've subluxed one, which means basically it dislocated, but it popped back in on its own. So it rode up on the rim and then it popped back in. Yeah, not good. Not my favorite injury. And I've also had a pretty serious injury to my AC joint, which is where your collarbone welds onto your shoulder. And all the stuff that they were working him through the week that he hurt it, right? I've been through all that PT. I was watching the trainer trying to keep it warm on the sideline, all the range of motion exercises they were using to try and keep it limber. I was like, I remember all those. And I thought, oh man, he probably popped so anyways, we don't need to get into shoulder physiology, but I thought he probably took a pretty good shot to the top of his shoulder, which sort of drives the collarbone joint down into the top of your shoulder. It's called the supraspinatus. It's part of your rotator cuff. There's 4 little pieces that suck your shoulder into your body, basically. He probably took a really good pop on the top of that one and maybe split it, maybe separated it, maybe just aggravated it, but makes it very, very painful anytime you basically pull your elbow up and try and elevate your shoulder over about, shoulder height, right? And to throw, that's part of the throwing motion is to get that elbow up to whip the ball. That's all going to be generating that torque and rotation off the shoulder when you've taken that kind of injury is difficult. It hurts like crazy, and you don't want to do it after a while. It gets stiff, it gets tight. That's the reason they were putting the warming compresses on there to try and keep it loose. So it's not one of those things that's going to get a whole lot better throughout the season. Continued use is going to continue to aggravate it and keep it inflamed. Yeah, I was worried that game because he was showing very obvious signs of having taken that injury. And
they're not pushing the ball down the field, which, I mean, the one saving grace is, okay, you're playing against the Patriots defense where even though they don't have any pass rush, they do have good DBs. So I can understand maybe they're trying to do, check down city in that game. Like, okay, I'll give you a pass. And the Rams defense is literally the best defense against the deep ball in the entire league. Okay, I can understand why DeAndre Hopkins is not running a single route past 15 yards. I get it. But even though they're playing against the Giants this week, another good defense, if they're not taking any shots down the field for 3 straight weeks, like, it's one thing if, like, you're playing a good defense. It's another if they know they can't take shots down the field. That might be part of the reason why.
Yeah, there's 2 things there. Christian Kirk, if you look at Christian Kirk's production up to the point where Kyler injured his shoulder and post, it's a wasteland, right? Christian Kirk was ascending. Yes. He was getting a bunch of really productive down the field shots. He was scoring touchdowns. And as soon as Kyler hurt his shoulder, Christian Kirk's production went to nothing. The other one was posted by Doug Farrar today, who said, since the Hail Murray, the game winner to Hopkins in the end zone, the Cardinals have only attempted 1 pass over 20 yards to DeAndre Hopkins since that.
Yeah, which the very next game after the Hail Murray was when he got hurt. It was against Seattle.
Yeah.
So I think, again, this is not the kind of offense that won't throw deep. There's something up here, and I think it's with the shoulder. It's not just the defenses they're playing. I think they know they can't throw deep, and they would rather not have Kyler throw up ducks if the velocity isn't there. And they're trying to make do with the quick passing game. They're trying to make do with the running game because his legs still work, and Kenyon Drake is still running the ball.
Yep. Chase Edmonds had a couple of really good plays this week. So they've got other weapons. I mean, Dan Arnold has had a couple of really good weeks, and maybe that's the blessing in disguise for this Cardinals, offense, is that they learned to use the tight end a little bit more. Whereas before they were just whipping it to Hopkins and Kirk. That could, come into play either late this year or early next. But it is a different offense from the Cardinals than we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah, just keep an eye on it. I would say the Cardinals-Giants game is definitely a game to watch this week, which is not something I expected to say about a month ago, but here we are. Because you're going to want to look at Kyler's arm. If they're still not throwing deep, then there really is a problem. If they lose again, if they go below 500 with 3 weeks left in the season, you might as well just sit Kyler for the rest of the year because you're not going to make the playoffs at that point. And then in the rest of the year after that, let me see. So you got the Eagles, and then you got the 49ers, and then you got a rematch with the Rams, which they would probably lose again. So you're looking like at best 9-7. You're probably not making the playoffs at that point. And even if you do, you're making the playoffs with an injured quarterback. So if they lose this week to the Giants, I would probably just sit Kyler and just it is what it is. They've dealt with injuries to Chandler Jones. Now they're dealing with injuries to their quarterback. It sucks, but I would rather not have him aggravate this any further and have it become an Andrew Luck type situation where he was also dealing with a lingering shoulder injury that he was playing through. If they lose this game, just shut it down.
We talked about this actually in our preview of the AFC West at the beginning of the year, and we said that the Cardinals were the team in the league that had the sort of thinnest veneer of starting talent, right? That if all their starters stayed healthy, they were as dangerous as anybody in the league. But if you gave about 3 or 4 key injuries on either side of the ball, and they've already taken certainly a couple of those on defense, Kyler would be the sort of kingpin on offense for that particular designation. You give 3 or 4 good injuries to the Cardinals, they're not a team that can recover right now. They don't have that kind of depth. So unfortunately, we're sort of seeing whether or not our theory was correct playing out, which is not great for Cardinals fans. But I'm with you. If they sort of lose hope for sneaking into the playoffs, it's time to shut them down and protect that shoulder.
Yeah, because if they lose this week, your best case scenario is 9-7, and your most likely scenario is 8-8. It ain't worth it. It is not worth hurting Kyler Murray for that. It just isn't. So we'll see how it goes. Next game, Colts-Texans. This was a heartbreaker for me because they were inside the 10-yard line, final minute, and then Nick Martin throws a ground ball of a snap to Deshaun Watson. He can't jump on it. And, of course, Martin also missed his block. He got backdoored by Grover Cleveland at the exact same time. And then Grover Stewart, not Grover Cleveland, not the president.
I was like, wow, that guy, he's having a tremendous performance as a ghost.
Hey, I've had a lot of whiskey today.
Nah, it's all right. I am on my 3rd straight podcast tonight and starting to feel it as well. But Buckner played out of his mind in this game. We talked about it a little bit before the podcast, how you were talking about the interior of the Texans offensive line not really holding up, but that's a little bit of the players they have there not holding up and a little bit of Buckner playing just like a maniac. He was a force. He wrecked things in this particular game. So, there are other credits to give out, but Buckner looked very much on that sort of dominant early season pace that we saw him on.
Yeah, that whole Colts interior line destroyed the Texans interior. They gave up a combined 8 pressures from the left guard position because there's a rotation right now with Senio Clemente who's the kid they just drafted in the second round a couple years ago? I'm blanking on my own left guard. Either way, they were doing a rotation at left guard, and then Zach Fulton was playing right guard, and they gave up double-digit pressures combined from both guard spots, which was just awful. Buckner was killing him. Grover Stewart, got his name correct this time, was killing him. Nick Martin got absolutely destroyed, especially in the last play of the game. where he did the bad snap and then Stewart jumped on the ball and ended it right then and there. Deshaun did everything he could, which he usually does, to keep this game competitive. And yeah, I mean, one of the three best quarterbacks in the league. It's Mahomes, it's Rodgers, and it's him, in my opinion. Like, it's...
If you're adding everything up and what he brings to the team, yeah, it's hard to keep him out of that particular
and especially just with what he has around him.
Oh, God, which is nothing.
Rodgers has a great offensive line and Devontae. Pat has everything that Pat has. And also we're including coaching staffs in this too. Like, Deshaun has an interim coach and his number one receiver is Brandon Cooks.
Yeah,
come on.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. Big shout out to Justin Houston in this one. He is a bootleg shot of the week nominee. Huge strip sack of the aforementioned Deshaun Watson. But the Texans got it back, but it was a big hit, big play. 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter if you want to look it up. And then Houston gets Watson for a safety. Inside stunt, easy as later in the game. So Justin Houston, big shout out, big strip sack, big safety, about as much impact as you can make on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, he had a monster day. That whole Colts front, had a monster day. And this is not a bad pass protecting line at the tackle position, but Houston was giving them, both of them, Tunsil and Howard. He was giving them all they could handle. It was kind of a vintage day from him. Kind of good to see him have was it 2012, 2013 when he had like 20 sacks, kind of go back to that for a week of being that dominant Justin Houston that we all knew and loved. Just a monster performance.
Yeah, he made noise for sure.
But yeah, overall, heartbreaking game. Colts are still a good team when they're healthy. They're getting all their guys back now. And as long as Rivers doesn't turn the ball over, I'm telling you, man, the run game here, the defense, the weapons they've got outside, if they can just kind of rely on Yak City and ball control and playing defense, they can go far. Like, I truly think they could be the best team in this division if they just rely on that formula and if Phil doesn't turn the ball over.
If and if.
If and if. I know it's a big if. But we still got 4 more games to test that theory now that they're getting all their guys back. I'm pretty stoked to see what happens. Moving on to our next game, Browns-Titans. Damn, Cleveland. 38 first half points. Baker was dealing. The Titans have no pass rush, which against that offensive line, which is one of the best pass protecting lines in the league. I mean, Baker had all day. And it was also kind of the first game in a month that Cleveland was playing that wasn't in terrible weather. So we saw what it looks like when Baker's protected and when he's not fighting against gale force winds and hail and rain and all that kind of stuff. He was dealing. His weapons were roasting these Titans DBs out there. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a great kind of stutter go touchdown where he just, I don't even know what corner he killed, but he left him in the dust by 20 yards. And Jarvis had a really nice touchdown at the back of the end zone. Again, kind of just using his eyes to manipulate the DB and gave a little shimmy at the top and then skirted along the back of the end zone on I guess you could call it a dig, but it wasn't really a dig route. But yeah, man, this Cleveland offense was firing on all cylinders. And when everybody's healthy, when the weather's good, when Baker's protected, this system is really, really, really effective.
Yeah, and the Browns really hit on all cylinders all day long. The Browns forced a fumble from Derrick Henry early. They recovered. They were back in business. Even at the end of the half, there was a heave play. They forced a fumble on that. Everybody was trying to get in on the action because the offense was stomping. And a lot of it comes from hard play action. And Baker, when he is most effective, is giving hard play action fakes. And we talked about this before the podcast. He and Kirk Cousins are two of the best, if not the best in the league at that particular skill. Really hard, well executed, hard play action fakes where they hold the ball and they generate themselves anywhere between a half second and a second and a half of basically free space and free time to usually roll out and find a target. And when Mayfield is on, this is peak Baker, right? Even on the scramble all day long, really accurate, just dealing dimes and just busting the Titans. again, that sort of avalanche of first half points made it so this game was never going to be all that close. And Baker and that hard play action fake, really good one on the goal line for the Landry TD. That was off a hard play action fake. Another hard double fake on the goal line by Mayfield, and he tossed it to the tackle eligible. That was Kendall Lamb for the TD. That was their sort of one of their 2 trick plays this week. Seems like Stefanski runs at least 1 trick play a week. And then the other one was that 75-yarder to DPJ. Really hard play action fake, corner bit. That was it. DPJ was all alone. He was like 10 yards open when Baker hit him for that super long touchdown. So all of that stuff coming off hard play action, and Baker is the perfect actor for that because he's even fooling the cameraman about half the time.
And his part of it is just because his footwork, even when he was coming out of OU, like that was one of the main things I really liked about him. He's got quick feet, like really quick feet. He's just very precise with his footwork. He's got kind of a low center of gravity, so when he changes direction, it's quick. Like he doesn't lumber in the pocket, like a giraffe-shaped Mike Glennon. Like when he puts his foot in the ground and climbs the pocket, he climbs the pocket. When he needs to shuffle, he shuffles. Like he's really good at moving in and around pressure. He wasn't really pressured that much in this game because the Titans' pass rush is terrible. They only have, I think it's like 14 sacks on the year, which is second worst in the league. Seems like Seattle gets that in 2 weeks these days.
I was going to say, and Simmons has like 6 of them.
Yeah, it's bad. And so when you match up this kind of pass rush, with this kind of offensive line, with a quarterback that is really, really quick getting in and out and away from pressure, like Baker has his faults, but pocket maneuverability is not one of them. This was a recipe for disaster. They were 4.5 point underdogs in this game. I picked them to win. I did not expect them to blow them out. I really didn't. Like I thought it was a good matchup for Cleveland. I didn't expect this. So hell of a performance for them. Now that we're seeing them play in a little bit better weather, ironically in December. Now that we're seeing them play in a little bit better weather, now that they're kind of getting guys back, they got Myles Garrett back off the COVID list. I think who's the right guard that's actually
Wyatt Teller.
People. Wyatt Teller. He was back this week, and he didn't have a great game by his standards, but it was still by every other guard standards, it was a very, very good game. But they're getting all their best players back. And we're finally starting to see the full potential of this team. And they are scary, man. They're really scary. I'm excited to see what they do when they rematch against Pittsburgh. And I think they have another game coming up against Baltimore this coming Monday, if I remember correctly, where they got stomped by Baltimore the first time. But this is a whole different Browns team. And I think they have a legitimate shot to beat them and at least get in position to kind of secure a wild card berth here.
Yeah, that would be a signature win for them, and I think they can absolutely do it. Ravens have been stumbling a little bit of late, and the Browns, like you said, are starting to come together really on multiple fronts. Weather is obviously not controllable, but in terms of play calling, in terms of personnel, balance, right? They've been relying on the run really, really heavily, which why wouldn't you when you've got, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, but they've, the passing game started to come together. The play action game, therefore, is working that much better. It felt a little bit like the Patriots game this week, right? Where we saw a team that had a bunch of ideas and they all worked in the same week. That was Cleveland this week and the Patriots this week as well.
Yeah. Why don't we move on to Broncos Chiefs, which, even if the Browns make the playoffs, all roads go through Kansas City at this point, and they proved once again that even when things don't go exactly correct for them, they have the largest margin of error in the entire NFL because they have Pat Mahomes. You're getting field goals over and over and over again. Denver's really tightening up in the red zone, and then it comes in the fourth quarter, and Travis Kelce's just ripping off third down after third down after third down, and then they were able to pull away in the end. But this was a very mistake-laden game for the Chiefs. Penalties, drops galore. just mistakes in protection. Like, it was not a clean game for them, and yet it still felt like a win was never in doubt. And that is the Chiefs these days. Like, they have the biggest margin for error in the league, and it's not even close.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the most studied games out there when the playoffs come. And folks are trying to match up against the Chiefs, which is going to happen. Chiefs have already secured their playoff berth. The thing that goes underrated possibly in this game is that the Broncos held the Chiefs, the most prolific offense in the league, to field goals. I highlighted every piece of the notes where Casey answers with 3. They settle for 3. Denver holds them again, and they only get 3. Casey only gets 3 again. They leave 12-10. Another field goal, right? Even at the end, 22-16. Like, people are going to look at what Denver did to the Chiefs. They're certainly going to see what the Chiefs did to themselves, but they're going to look at what Denver did to the Chiefs and say, how can we do that? Because there isn't any hope to stop the KC offense completely. If anything, this day proved that. But how can you slow them down enough so you have a chance at the end of the game and you're not down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter? If you can slow them down, you've got a chance against them. And Denver produced a little bit of a blueprint here to say this is what we did to slow them down. Now, whether or not a particular team matching up against them in the playoffs has that personnel or is able to scheme it that way, or just gets lucky enough that KC shoots themselves in the foot a little bit, remains to be seen. But a lot of people are going to be watching this film come playoff time to make sure that they're doing everything they can that the Broncos did, because the Broncos really blunted what has been an offensive juggernaut up to this point. But you're right. At the end, Mahomes hit his groove. I wrote, starts producing some things out of nothing, which is a Mahomes trademark, and they sort of marched away at the end and pulled out a victory. But in general, the fact that the Broncos held them for a field goal 5 times is pretty remarkable.
The number one team that the Chiefs, let's just say they make the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they will, but there's a decent chance at this point that it happens because they're the best team in the AFC. Let's just say they make the Super Bowl. The number one team they do not want to see is the Los Angeles Rams, because they run a very, very similar defense to what the Broncos do. And in fact, when you look at like rate of playing 2 high safeties, the Rams and the Broncos are the only 2 teams. Keep in mind, Brandon Staley is a Vic Fangio disciple.
I was going to say, there's a reason for all of this.
There's a reason for that. They are the only 2 teams in the league that run 2 high safeties on 60% or more of their defensive snaps and employ light boxes on 75% or more of their defensive snaps. And so what that means is they are playing from the top down. It's a lot of quarters coverage. They're taking away the deep ball first and foremost, which is what Kansas City does. And they're daring you to run the ball because, mathematically speaking, yards per attempt on the ground are almost always going to be lower than yards per attempt through the air. Running the ball, statistically, is a less efficient offensive play.
I was going to say, so what you're saying is it's a modern defense. Oh,
it's a modern defense. Yes. And you see it a lot in the college ranks where it's 2 high all over the place. It's 3-3-5 all over the place. It's tight fronts galore.
And what Casey's going to have to do if that happens is go back to that Clyde Edwards-Helaire game that we saw earlier in the year and blow people off the ball and run the ball. And they've shown they can do it. They've sort of slow played that. They've sort of hidden that throughout the last several weeks. But I think they've got that in their pocket for just such an occasion, right? If they come up against a team like the Broncos or like the Rams, they understand that they can run the ball. It'll be interesting to see if they can do that late in the season in the bad weather too.
And the big thing is Andy Reid willing to stick with it? Because traditionally, Andy is not somebody that sticks with the run game. He wants to throw and throw a lot.
Especially in the playoffs.
Especially in the playoffs. He wants to keep the ball in the hands of his best player. That's Pat Mahomes. The Broncos are banking on that. They want you to throw. They want you to check it down so they can come up and rally and tackle. And if you throw deep, they have one of, if not the best free safety in the league in Simmons that can go over there and pick it off. And he almost got one in this game.
It was close. Pat. Super close.
He was close. But when you look at defensively, 60% of passing snaps over the last 6 seasons. This was a study that Pro Football Focus did. 60% of passing snaps come against single high defensive structures. That has been the meta in the NFL for a long time, spurned by the cover 3 revolution from the Seahawks, which is we're playing cover 1, we're playing cover 3. And as that started to happen, teams started relying more on deep crossing routes and stuff that puts single high safeties in conflict. Again, Pro Football Focus did a study on this, and I'm going to be doing a video on it inspired by an article from my buddy, Coach Cody Alexander. 76% of crossing routes are thrown against single high defenses. What are the Chiefs known for? Hitting Tyreek and Travis Kelce on these deep crossing routes where they got wide open space. Against a too high defensive structure, you're not going to hit those. And you have to basically, in order to beat that, you got to sit in the pocket all day long and try to hit like Dagger or Mills or something like that takes forever. So Pat has to do his kind of whole back pedal, back, and then chuck it deep, which he can do it, but the success rate isn't super high.
Yeah.
So again, it was a brilliant defensive plan from the Broncos of we're playing too high, we're daring you to run, we're going to stop the deep ball, see if you can beat us. And they were able to hold them to field goals. And that's why I think if they go up against the Rams, that's the worst case scenario for them in the Super Bowl because they do the same thing, but they do it so much better. And I think the Rams could actually beat the Chiefs if they played today.
Huh. That's really interesting. Yeah, I love that perspective. And we'll see. That's what we get to look forward to as football fans. But we should probably get on to another piece of ass kicking. There's no other way to get around that. Pats Chargers.
Man.
Patriots go on the road. Patriots have not put a complete game together. Pretty much it feels like all season. They've either had one half or the other play well or neither, which has been very shocking, I think, for Patriots fans. Not used to that at all. Coach making excuses a little bit earlier in the year. That is certainly not something New England is used to. But boy, the Patriots just took it to the Chargers in every conceivable way. Got to Herbert early for a sack. Chargers missed the field goal. And then Gunnar Olszewski, who's not a player I think we've mentioned on the podcast before, had a freaking day. 70 yards for the punt return TD. Ripped off another huge punt return later, and then really late in the game, takes a little in route, breaks it 38 yards for a TD. Gunnar Olszewski went off, and so did the rest of the Patriots at the same time. Speaking of Senior Bowl alumni, Josh Uche got into the act, getting a sack on Herbert. Cam was Cam of old, willed one in for a TD on the QB delay, just pure size and push on that one. At that point, they were up 21-0. Pats returned a field goal that they blocked right before half. Herbert threw a pick to Winovich. I had to check my notes on that. I was like, wait, he threw a pick to
It was a great play by him too. I mean, it was
beautiful play.
It was kind of like a play action, like it wasn't a bootleg, but it was like a play action, like they were faking like they were rolling the pocket and then trying to hit a shallow cross behind it. And Chase just read it all the way. He's like, look, if you're rolling away from me, there's a decent chance I got a guy coming my way. So we just drop back in the lane. Herbert didn't even see him, just threw it right to him.
Yeah, threw it right in the chest. Definitely didn't see him until too late. Came in from the opposite side. Cam ripped one to N'Keal Harry, a guy we haven't talked about hardly at all for a short TD. They were up 35-0 at that point. Finally, Herbert unloads one in the second half to Guyton for a long gain, which we're so used to seeing him do that with regularity. It felt like a huge drought. It was only actually about a half of football. But then very quickly after that, he's too long, and J.C. Jackson picked him off. He was looking for a receiver that was in between two levels of coverage. Jackson was the deep guy. Herbert put a little bit of extra float on it. Jackson picked it off. Adam Butler tossed a sack in. Pats went up 45-0 by the end, and it's just an all-around thrashing by a team hitting on all cylinders. Offense, defense, special teams. In a very Belichickian mode, all playing together in unison, and they just ground the Chargers into dust.
It was a very interesting Belichickian defensive game plan, too, because what are the Chargers good at? beating man coverage. You got a post-up guy in Mike Williams. You got Keenan Allen, who shreds man coverage with route running. Austin Eckler can beat pretty much any linebacker you throw at him in man coverage. Guyton's got speed. Henry's a good receiving tight end. Like, they thrive on beating man coverage, and especially beating man coverage under pressure. On paper, you would think that the Patriots would be a pretty bad matchup against the Chargers because they do a lot of man coverage and they have to do a lot of pressure because they can't get any pressure with 4. Like, they don't have a great pass rush. So you would think on paper that the Chargers would be able to tear them up, but Belichick, being Belichick, knows I'm not going to play into their hand. I'm not going to put my guys out on islands where Herbert can just retreat and then use his cannon for an arm to throw up jump balls that Mike Williams can pay off. Because when you look at Herbert's best performances, again, a lot of it is taking shots deep against man coverage with no safety help under pressure. I'm not going to play into that. So we played match quarters, kind of similar to what the Broncos were doing to the Chiefs. I'm playing too high. I'm daring you to run with Austin Eckler because I think that they can probably match 6 for 6 and run defense a lot easier than they can do it in the pass rush. Much better run defenders than pass rushers. So he's like, okay, I'm going to give you a light box, dare you to run. If you go 3-by-1, meaning you got trips to one side and then an isolated receiver, I'll put my best corner, Stephon Gilmore, on the isolated receiver, and then I'm going to double the Keenan Allen on the other side and then dare you to beat me. They couldn't do it. If you go 2-by-2, I'll just have Gilmore follow Keenan and then double everybody else. Dare you to beat me. They couldn't. And they weren't really throwing pressure at him. They weren't really throwing man coverage at him, at least not traditional man coverage. It was more like match zone coverage. And they couldn't beat it. They couldn't throw deep. They couldn't really run the ball effectively, at least as effectively as they wanted. Just a brilliant, brilliant game plan to zig when the Chargers probably expected them to zag. And they had no answer. They really didn't. And by the end of the game, I was kind of saying on Twitter, it's like, you guys got to pull Justin out of this game because it's not doing him any good. It really wasn't. He was getting crushed.
Yeah, if you'd lost Herbert to any kind of injury, I don't care if he hit his thumb on a helmet, there would have been intense scrutiny on Anthony Lynn and his staff for keeping a rookie, in a game when he's down 35-0 and clearly going to lose the game. Like, get him out of there, right? I have the feeling Tyrod Taylor's recovered by now. Like, there's no shame in throwing him in there and sitting Justin Herbert down and going, so now you've met Bill. Next time we'll see if we can't scheme something up better for you based on this. But have a Fresca and chill out. This one's over. And they didn't, and they got lucky. They didn't lose him to an injury, but they certainly could have. So great job by the Patriots. Just a very, very complete game from them. And that moves us on to the Raiders and the Jets, which was not a complete game, but it was a completely interesting game. The end of this game got a lot of scrutiny, had a lot of conversation, got a defensive coordinator fired. We'll talk about that in a bit, but we're going to talk about what led up to it first. And if Mekhi Becton has a kryptonite, it's Clelin Ferrell?
Yeah. Didn't see that one coming.
Weirdest statement ever, but it's true. Clelin Ferrell beat the brakes off Mekhi Becton. Clelin Ferrell got around the corner, strip sack Darnold. Las Vegas recovers. Raiders got a field goal out of that one. Trayvon Mullen, guy we both liked at corner, picked Darnold on a hook route. Great play. Cut underneath it. The Jets had no answer for one Darren Waller, which is really interesting because Waller is a primary target on the Raiders offense. Certainly somebody you'd be game planning for. He had over 200 yards in this game. The Jets just had nothing for Waller. And given that, you'd think the Raiders walked in this one, right? That they absolutely stomped the Jets. I'm sure that's what all the betting lines had previous to this game. It didn't turn out that way.
Nope.
It didn't turn out that way. It turned out that the Raiders needed a very they needed an incredibly lucky heave against an unfortunately called zero blitz at the end of the game to win this. Now, if you'd said that a month ago, that that's what the Raiders were going to need to beat the Jets, everybody would have called you insane. But that's exactly the way that it played out. We can talk a little bit about what happened at the end of the game, but before we get there, I want to talk about a quarterback working himself into the Bootleg Shot of the Week nomination. Sam Darnold absolutely trucks Jeff Heath, plunging in for the score. 10:25 left in the fourth quarter.
With a bad shoulder, too.
Ran him over and left him, I don't want to say lifeless because that was not true. Left him considering whether or not he wanted to get up again on the goal line when Darnold went in to score. Pretty rare. We've had a couple of offensive players that have been featured. We have Chris Carson this week as well. We had James Robinson earlier in the year. But pretty rare that a quarterback running into the end zone, especially one of Darnold's stature, not one of Cam Newton's stature, gets himself a Bootleg Shot of the Week nomination, but he absolutely did on this one. Also had a Denzel Mims sighting for a 2-point conversion. Ty Johnson had a great game, over 100 yards in this one. Score really powered the Jets' running offense. Ty Johnson probably not a name that a lot of casual fans outside of the New York market know. Had a very, very good game. But what it comes down to is Raiders fail on 4th and 3 and give it back to the Jets with 1:37 left. If you said that almost any other week, you're like, oh, look, $1:37. They just gave it back. That's ball game. They're not going to win. And honestly, that's probably what should have happened. But what did happen in your eyes?
So I saw an interesting point on Twitter that I kind of agree with on this whole why are you calling zero blitz, which if it was me, I would not have called zero at all. There was a kind of an exchange on coaching Twitter of like the best way to do it is to call a coverage that the Patriots call 5 sideline, which is basically you're playing 3 deep defenders if it's cover 3 and then man coverage everywhere else and you're rushing like 2 guys. And it's basically like, okay, we're playing man coverage so that you can't just do like what the Chiefs did with Tyreek a few years back and turn it into a punt return. Like if you catch the ball underneath, we're going to attack you immediately, but we're going to have 3 guys deep just in case you are throwing a Hail Mary. That's like the established what you do in this scenario. But the point that I saw on Twitter was that zero isn't an awful call because the mindset of it is they're not going to have time to throw deep anyway.
Right.
So when Ruggs got him on that double move, like the thing was like, well, of course he's going to bite on it because it's zero. He's expecting the ball to be out at that point anyway. Like he doesn't expect Carr to be able to avoid pressure, climb the pocket, and get the throw off anyway. Like if you want to blame anything, blame the fact that the pressure didn't get home.
Blame the rushers.
Because it's, you're getting a free guy. Like that's what the point of zero is. You get a free guy to eliminate the time for Carr to throw deep to the end zone. And yet he was still able to throw deep to the end zone because he was able to avoid pressure and climb the pocket. So it's like, yeah, was the call great? No. Do I understand why he did it? Yes, to a degree. Would I have done it? No. But the execution was bad. If the execution was better, we're not even having this conversation.
Nope.
Derek Carr gets sacked, game over. So it is what it is. And was Greg Williams going to get fired at the end of the season anyway? Yeah. So it's not really like it's a huge slight against him or anything like that. He was going to get fired no matter what. He only had a month left on the job anyway. Like I'm not crying tears for Greg Williams. But I do understand why he made that call. That's what he does. He calls zero blitz. That's his thing. Like,
yeah, that was the point I read off Twitter is, if Greg Williams was going to go down in a blaze of glory, he was going to go down in a blaze of glory with zero, and that's probably the most fitting thing ever. If he'd rushed 3 and Carr had found 7 seconds and then heaved up a Hail Mary that was successful, that would have been sort of the anti-Greg Williams. So,
yeah.
He went out like he'd want to go out, and like you said, maybe a month earlier, but none sooner. He was definitely going to leave at the end of the season with the rest of the coaching staff anyways. So bit of a scapegoat, a very interesting result. And, there's a lot of speculation about the tank, right? About Greg Williams just saved the Jets, Trevor Lawrence, right? That they get the opportunity to pick Trevor Lawrence now. Couldn't be further from the truth. Greg Williams is a teeth through the floorboards kind of defensive coordinator. He is never going to give that up. Players on the field with the possibility of being injured and careers as short as they are, they're not in for let's all just mail it in for the next month so we can get this kid out of Clemson to come save us adult men that get paid to play football. That is not the way NFL locker rooms work. Executives might tank. Coaches, if they have a ton of security, might tank, but players are not going to tank. So
they're good enough at losing on their own. They don't need to try.
Yeah, not a thing. So that gets us through all the games we're going to talk about. If we didn't talk about your team's game, it's because we hate them. Not true. That's what we get every week on Twitter. Why do you hate my team? You didn't mention them. We didn't talk about the Chicago-Detroit game, because it was abysmal. And, Chicago showed some improvement.
Which
but
I will say, we haven't talked about the Bears.
We
we haven't talked about the Bears in a while. I do want to chime in here and say that. We will talk about Texans-Bears next week. I am promising you right now, we will talk about Texans-Bears next week.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way cosmically to avoid that. That shit show will have to be that revolution will be televised. Yes. We will talk about it. But our bootleg shot of the week summary from this week: Shaq Lawson with the big blindside sack. Justin Houston with his huge strip sack of Watson in the Texans game. Jabril Peppers with a big shot on Tyler Lockett right at the beginning of the game, about 2 minutes in. And the very next play, Chris Carson trucking the snot out of Jabril Peppers. So there's a nice back-to-back combo involving the same player. Sam Darnold trucking Jeff Heath right at the goal line, running him over. That was 10:25 left in the fourth quarter. And then one we didn't mention, Vernon Butler. This is the Bills-San Francisco game, and he stoned Tevin Coleman on the goal line. Go ahead and look it up. 7:52 left in the fourth quarter. Vernon Butler comes through and smacks the snot out of Tevin Coleman. Just drops him in his tracks right about the 4. I think the snap was about the 2-yard line, so they lost a couple of yards. Vernon Butler's had a very up and down career. This was a positive rep for Mr. Butler. Let's just say that.
Yeah, you could say positive rep. He absolutely crushed Tevin Coleman. I didn't see the beginning of the play. I don't know if he slipped a block or they forgot to block him, but Tevin got the worst end of that one. He got crushed.
Yeah, Tevin thought he had a pretty fine opening. Vernon actually came off a block. He did get blocked, but it was a bit of a late developing run from a slightly deeper set, not a pistol, and he ran smack into a 300-pound guy that was very, very interested in making sure he didn't make any more progress. So those are the bootleg shot of the week nominees. We will post them on the YouTube page. Keep voting. You guys' participation in that one has been fantastic. Again, keep dropping your comments on the YouTube page. Interact with Brett or I on Twitter. We are going to get ourselves out of here. I am wrapping up a marathon podcast session tonight. This is the third one in a row that I've booked, so I'm going to pass out after this. What are you going to do?
I am going to finish that Justin Jefferson episode and get it out in the morning as God is my witness.
Famous last words. We hope that's true. Yeah. But until then, enjoy all the NFL action. There is a lot of it. The bye weeks are over, so we're going to get full slates from here on out. Some playoff seeding to understand, some draft positioning to start shaping up. Who's in, who's out. It's all pretty fascinating. Keep watching, and we will talk to you soon.
Later.